So here we are continuing with our rig, lesson 1.1, the IKs and controls for the legs. And as usual, we're going to start on the left leg. Unfortunately, unlike the joints, there's not much of a transfer of things from one side to the other. I can't mirror IKs, I can't mirror grouping structures, so a lot of stuff is going to be done twice. Alright, so first up we want our IK handle tool. And we're going to set this to the rotate plane solver. These two things should be enabled by default, and then we need to have sticky enabled. That's going to leave the IK in place when we move the hip and allows us to tell the foot to stay in place. So we're going to, of course, click at the top of the chain first, so the hip, and then where we actually want to be able to move the IK, the ankle, we click next. And over here in our hypergraph, there should be an effector down below the hip, and then there should be the IK handle over here. And if we look, it should have turned brown. And I'm going to select that IK handle, and I'm going to label it left ankle IK. I'm going to grab my IK tool, I'm going to put the same thing on the right hand side. I'm going to call that right ankle IK. Alright, and the purpose of these, of course, will be to, there we go, test both of them out, make sure the knee, bends in the right direction. You'd be surprised how often that doesn't happen. Make sure when testing the IK, you undo all the way back to where it started. These are absolute numbers, meaning that is where it is on the grid. They don't go to 0, so it's very hard to reset things with the IK. Often your best bet is just to delete it and start again. So make sure you're always undoing properly after you test everything. Okay, so we need to add a control to our foot in order for any of this to work. And mine's just a NURB circle that I made linear instead of cubic, so it would be straight lines, and I added some more sections and just shaped it how I wanted. One key thing for me with an IK foot control is that a lot of it sort of be flush with the ground. That way it's also where you're flush with your foot, so that 0 on the Y means foot is on the ground, so long as the foot's not being bent. The other thing is make sure it's not just a flat circle on the ground. You want something that's a little bit easier to kind of connect with, something that you can select. And the third thing is we don't want to be going over this middle line here. The feet aren't going to get much more closer together than that, and I want to make sure my two things aren't overlapping too much. Alright. Let me undo a little bit here. There we go. So this is my control right after it was made, and there's a couple things we have to do. One is that right now its pivot point is somewhere very useless. It's kind of just blah, middle of the foot, it's not next to any joint. We actually want to put it right where the ankle is. So I'm going to hold down D. I think nope. Holding down D to toggle for a pivot, to move the pivot point is good usually. However, I need this to snap right to the middle of this joint. So I'm going to hit insert to go into insert mode sort of fully, so I can hold down V. You'll see this turns to a circle, and it'll snap right to the center of the ankle. That's where we want this foot control. That's what we want it to rotate around, because when the whole foot rotates, this control is going to rotate, and we want it to do that around the ankle. That's where the IK handle is, and so we want to be able to move this from where the IK handle is. Okay, but before we connect this to the IK handle or to the ankle, we need to do a couple things with this control. You can see right here that it's got all these weird numbers on it. It means it's not zeroed out. It means its starting position is at negative 0.19 for the translate X and negative 2.239 for the translate Z. It's impossible to get it back to that original position. You have to write all these numbers down. That's a pain in the neck. So what we do is we say modify freeze transformations, and everything's zeroed out, except scale obviously should be 1. Alright, and the other thing we need to make sure we do is get rid of the history on this. We want it to be as if this sprang into being looking like this and being here. So we say edit, delete by type history. No history, frozen transformations, everything all nice and neat. And of course, last but not least, well, shouldn't we name this? Left foot control. You can abbreviate control, a lot of people do that. I don't. And if we take a look at a hypergraph, let's see here. You can see that we've got our 2 joint chains for our legs, an effector on each one of them. And the ankle, the IK is actually, the IK handles are outside the hierarchy. And then the foot control is not connected to anything yet because that's what we need to do next. Now you'll remember from the controls lesson, or constraints lesson rather, that we can connect 2 different things to this control across 2 different ideas. So the translates can do one thing and the rotates can do another, right? So when we're connecting these, we select the driver first, and we need to look to our hypergraph because these things are all taking up the same space that we're connecting. So it's very difficult to select both at the same time. So we're going to do this all in the hypergraph. All right. Select the foot control because that's the driver, or rather that's the master actually, technically. And then we're going to shift select the ankle IK. And we're going to go to constrain. And remember, for the IK handle, the only thing we do is move translates. So we're going to go to point, make sure that says maintain offset, all axes, we hit add. And what that will have done with a giant exclamation point, that's not broken, that's just the symbol that it would have. So this is saying now that there is a constraint on this IK. It's also saying that right here with the blue, that's telling us it's constrained. And if I click on the control, right, it's going to move the IK handle. I didn't select the IK handle at all. I could hide IK handles if I wanted to. I could go to show. I can't, right? Hide them, can't even get to them, but if I pull on the control, we can move our leg. Alright, so that's how we want that to function. And then, of course, the other thing we can do is we can select the left foot control and shift select the left ankle and say constrain, orient, maintain offset, okay, add. And now what that will do is allow me to rotate the ankle. Alright, so we have one control doing 2 different things. The translates allow us to move the leg up and down, forwards and backwards. And the rotates allow us to move the foot. Okay, so what we've put together so far is basically the most bare bones a foot rig could possibly get to be. I don't even know if I would consider this a completed rig in a lot of ways because there's just too much that's missing. For example, in trying to move the hips forward, normally the foot would sort of roll off the ground in a completed rig, right? So it would roll off the ground for you and the ball of the foot would still be on the ground, but the heel would be up. Here, the whole foot just sort of floats away. And actually animating the ball of the foot to roll would be very, very difficult because right now all this rig has as a function is sort of forward kinematics on the bottom of the foot, right? Where I can tap the toe, but what I need to happen is actually this joint to move up while these 2 joints stay in the same place. And I don't have that. I don't have that option to do that yet. I mean, what I would have to do is rotate the whole foot like this, and then rotate this like this, and then also I now realize I have to move the foot up a little bit in order to put it on the ground. That's too many things. We want that to be a bit more automated. Okay, so what we need to be able to do is actually reverse the kinematics on the bottom part of the foot as well, right? So being able to, from this joint, tell this heel to rotate around it. We also need different points of rotation. Right now, I can't rotate the foot around where the heel is, so, you know, someone digs their heel into the ground. I also can't, even if I, you know, I point this down and I, you know, kind of dig the toe into the ground, I have no way of rotating this foot around the ball of the foot right here, you know, putting out a cigarette or something like that. So what we need to do is something called a reverse foot, right? So being able to reverse the kinematics and actually bring them forward and basically give ourselves a lot more pivot points for motion around the foot. And the way we're going to do that is something called a group-based foot. So first we need to go into our hypergraph here. Well, actually first we need to make sure that my control is zeroed out. It is. Then I need to go into here and I need to delete that orient or that point constraint. I need to delete that orient constraint, right? So I need to leave myself with a control that is not connected to anything. Okay, so to prep things for our group-based foot, we need a lot more IKs and we need more stuff on this control. That's why I haven't made another one for the left foot yet. We need to make some more changes before we bother duplicating it. So first step is going to be to grab the IK handle tool and go into the options. And in order to make this reverse foot or group-based foot, it is a reverse foot that happens to be group-based. Instead of this rotate plane solver, which has a couple extra options on it, we're going to be using these single chain solvers, right? So we're leaving the two RP solvers that are already in place, those two RP IKs, and we're adding more different IKs to the bottom of the foot. We're going to still leave sticky on. The rest of these settings should be the same. And we're going to click, this is going to seem strange, but we're going to click from the ankle just down to the middle of the foot. And that's an IK. And we're going to name that left foot IK. I'm going to grab the IK tool again. We're going to go from the middle of the foot to the end of the toe. I'm going to call that left toe IK. We're going to repeat the same process for the other side. Now, this may seem strange, right? The IK, the whole reason for it was so you could solve for that middle knee joint. You know, the whole reason for being was so that you could, not have to worry about, hey, what am I going to rotate the knee and how am I going to rotate the hip? So, but what we're actually using these IKs for isn't to solve for any... There we go. It's not to solve for these rotations, right? The reason we're using these IKs is actually they act as really good locators. For our group-based foot, they exist within the center of the joint and say, hey, look at me, I'm here, we can work around this. And the other reason is that it keeps certain things in place so that the foot doesn't rotate through the bottom of the grid. Right, toe IK. Alright, so we've got a bunch of IKs. Each leg should look something like this in your hypergraph, where the hip, the ankle, and the right foot all have effectors going underneath them. And you can rename these effectors if you wanted to. Alright, so we have lots of IKs, we have lots of IK handles. They look a little unwieldy, that's okay. Zoom that out a little. So what are we going to do next? Well, next we actually have to add some attributes to the foot control. You'll remember the foot control on Norman has tons of extra stuff on it. Where did all these things magically come from? Well, we can add our own attributes. And we can also hide attributes that we don't want to look at. The translates and the rotates we are going to keep because we would use them. But the scale... In this particular rig, we're not going to be scaling the legs, certainly not through this control at any rate. So I can right-click, I can select the three words, scale X, scale Y, scale Z. I can right-click, and I can say lock and hide selected. This is one of the keys to making a clean rig, is that you hide things that you don't want to have to worry about, because you don't want to have to worry about them. You don't want extra keys on them, cluttering up your graph editor. You don't want your animator accidentally doing anything stupid, and that animator might be you. Alright, so we're going to select our control and we need to add more attributes over here. So we go to Modify, and there's an Add Attribute right here. And all of these are going to be keyable that we're going to add. These are each time we click Add, there's going to be a new line over here in your channel box. And each of these are going to be float, which means these are different types of data. In other words, an integer would be whole numbers. Float could be basically any number we want. If you wanted to, you could put minimums and maximums. The default is 0 usually, but you could set it to something else. But we're going to add 5 different attributes to this control. First one's going to be called heel peel. That's sort of when you kind of peel the heel off the ground and leave the ball of the foot behind. We hit add. Next up, we have toe tap. Let's see, we've got the toe stand. This is sort of standing on the, rolling the foot up on the tippy toe rather than on the ball of the foot. Toe twist, exactly as it sounds. We twist a foot at the, the toe rather than in the middle of the ankle. And then last but not least is heel twist. And if you hit add, by the way, it leaves the window open, nice and easy for you. When you hit OK, it closes the window because you're done. And Maya was nice enough to put in spaces where I didn't put in any. It'll make nice, whole words out of this. Now, I didn't label these left versus right because you don't technically need to. In your graph editor, these attributes will show up as being under the left foot control. So you won't need, it won't be as hard to figure out where they're from. And I feel like putting left and right on the front of these is kind of, clutters it up a bit. Plus it allows me to copy this over to here without having to worry too much about it. Alright, so next up I want to be able to copy this foot control to the other side because I just did all this work and I don't have to do it again. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into insert mode and go to my front view. Now hold down X. I'm going to snap my pivot point over to here. This is temporary. This is just so I can mirror this control over to the other side and, be done with it. I shouldn't say mirror, I should say duplicate special. Alright. So let's see. The Z is to the scale of -1. We're making a copy. We're going to say duplicate special. And that didn't work. Alright, so the reason that duplicate special didn't work is because of before when I locked and hid all of the scales. You can't -Z a scale on something if you have locked it. So, new lesson, how to unlock and unhide things. So we're going to go to General Editors, under Window, and then Channel Control. And you'll see under Channel Control we have this keyable section right here. You'll notice that's everything that's here in alphabetical order. And then non-keyable and hidden. There are a lot of attributes that are buried in the attribute editor over here that you rarely to never see. And so we're going to scroll all the way down. We want scale X, Y, and Z. And we quick move with the little arrows over to this side and it moves them over here. So at least now we can see them. This is how you get stuff back that you've hidden. And then of course we've got to select them, right click, unlock in order to actually get them unlocked. Then we go to edit, duplicate special, and okay. Now it works. So lesson in order of operations there for us. Alright, so now I go into insert mode. I hold down V, I snap to the middle of this, and I'm actually going to do this in my 3D view so I can kind of double check that on all axes it's working. Same with this view. And you should know that sometimes the snapping to points may not seem like it's quite clicking. If it's not, just let go of it and then try moving it again. Sometimes it doesn't quite know to snap on. Let's see, and we're going to retitle this right foot control since it is for the right foot. And we're going to get rid of the 1. There we go. And of course we need to delete history on both of these. Always, always, always. And there we go. That way when we click on this, it shouldn't say anything about being the other one's shape. And the other thing we're going to do is, just because I'm paranoid, we're going to freeze transforms. Alright, probably didn't do anything because it already said 0, but just in case. Alright, and you could always there's nothing wrong with selecting this and shift selecting the right ankle IK and putting a point constraint on it, just to see, just to double check. Don't worry about these being there and this being weird. That's going to all get taken care of when we do the group-based foot. There we go. And make sure, you might have seen there a tiny little bit of a translate on here. You really want to make sure, before I disconnect these things, that I put it back exactly where it was. That's the danger in testing things. You sometimes mess things up for yourself. All right, I can't just delete this constraint and expect everything to go back to where it was. It's going to stay where it is now. It's just going to stop following each other. Alright, so we should be all set for our 2 group-based feet that we're going to make next time. We've got 2 controls. We've got IKs running from the hip to the ankle, from the ankle to the foot, and from the foot to the toe. Alright, so in the next video, we're actually going to put this together into a functioning foot.